Today's episode, we play some of the biggest stakes of our entire lives. 10, 25, 50, even the $100 straddle sometimes. I cannot wait for you guys to see this session. But first, let's enjoy the beautiful city of Dallas, Texas. After spending a wonderful day out in the beautiful city of Dallas, we finally make our way over to the TCH Dallas. I want to wish you all a very, very happy holiday season. Make sure to tell your loved ones that you do in fact love them. This is a great time of the year to do so. And remember, before we hop into this very first hand, which is a fun one, make sure you leave a comment down below. I'm giving away 2 articles of merch for absolutely free. Let me know your size in the comment section down below. Outside of that, the very first hand of note happens immediately into the session. It seems like the 100% VPIP is absolutely carrying over to this game because I am playing a little bit on the crazy side. The straddle is on to 50 and it will pretty much be on for the entirety of the session with the odd $100 straddle coming off here and there. The button raises to 150. I'm in the small blind with ace-8 of diamonds. Considering there is like 15 blinds in this game, it's probably a good idea to play aggressively here. So I go ahead and 3-bet, and I'm not going to go small. I'm going to go large here. I make it $600 to go. Considering we're actually only playing 4K effective here, I don't know if this is good or bad, but usually when you're playing deeper, going larger is the way to go. So when the action folds over to our opponent, Mr. Benham, he decides to make the call. I have no information on any player at the table except for seat 1 and seat 9 because I actually have played with them in the past. Outside of everyone else, I don't really do scouting work or preemptive stream sniping work. I just come here, blast off, and hopefully the cards go in my favor. So we're going off to a flop here that comes out queen, 8, deuce, all hearts. We flop top or middle pair with top kicker. Seems like an easy spot for us to just down bet here. We can still get called by a bunch of worse hands, and if we get raised, we can proceed with caution. Our opponent does decide to go with the latter option by raising to 1,000. Once again, there is definitely a little bit of concern here, but at the end of the day, my hand is just a little too good to fold, so I make the call with the amount of money I've already have invested in the hand. Turn card comes out the 5 of spades. Seems like an easy spot for us to continue by checking, and our opponent snap checks it back. Okay, when he does that, I feel like he will definitely be shutting down with a lot of his random bluffs. I don't have the ace of hearts, so, there's still an opportunity for my opponent to either have a flush or, more than likely, be bluffing with a high flush card. When the river comes a pretty reasonable brick as it comes the jack of diamonds, I think about my options for a quick second. Considering we have about 2.5k effective, slightly less than the pot at this point, I think that what I end up doing here is the mistake. I decide to go all in, but in real time, I feel like my opponent can definitely fold a middling queen or maybe even a hand like Jack 10 that might have got there on this river. Again, I don't know that to be quite sure. There's a chance that my opponent just snaps me off on this river card anyways with just a single pair that's better than mine. So I don't really know how great my jam is on the river, but that's why I did it in real time. I thought I can get my opponent to fold these single pair holdings that are better. I'd hate to just check it and he just snap checks back a hand that I can obviously beat, like pocket 10s or something. So a little unfortunate here when we get snap called and get shown 7-4 of hearts. Did not expect my opponent to have a hand this week in the 3-bet pot, but seems like he's taking a note out of my book. Nice hand, sir. Not too long thereafter, falling on my face, we are able to pick ourselves up, and it's a little easier when we pick up pocket 9s. $50 straddle is on. I decide to raise it up to 150 from the low jack. Folds over to the button, Mr. Elijah, who decides to 3-bet to 400. A very small sizing here. The one thing I will mention is, although once again I have no history with any of these players, I'm just going with gut instinct. It feels like to me Elijah's a professional or at least a thoughtful thinking player. With the action folding back over to me, I guess turned my hand into a bluff, but I will say very clearly, when I 4-bet this hand to 1.6k with the stacks and whatnot behind, I am 100% gonna call any 5-bet jam. It seems like a disaster, but I feel like my opponent's good enough to A, bluff, and B, have ace king, ace queen, hands that aren't just aces. All that to be said, it seems like Elijah is thinking to do that. He thinks for quite some time, looks back at his hand, and then settles on a fold. Happy to take it down either way. The old 4-bet with pocket nines, it's a pretty dangerous play. Pretty early on into the session, and we look down at a beautiful situation when OFC, a very wonderful gentleman, decides to raise from early position to 175. He gets 2 callers, and here they are. American Airlines, the weapons of mass destruction. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to spoil this a little bit ahead of time. This won't be the first or the second or the last time we end up picking pocket aces up in this session, so buckle up for a fun one. Easy squeeze spot here. I make it 700 to go. Everyone except the button makes the fold. We're going heads up here to a flop against a player I was not suspecting to go to a flop with. This is a pretty interesting spot here. I'm almost always guaranteed the best hand. I don't suspect my opponent can ever have a 3 here because I'm blocking ace 3. And there's just, yeah, it's not that likely. But once again, this is the same gentleman that had 7-4 suited against me. So yeah, maybe I'm just getting ahead of myself here. But there is a chance my opponent can have at least a queen, maybe some middling pairs. With all that to be said, a small bet is in order, so I make it 500 to go, and my opponent makes a call. When the turn card comes out, the ace of hearts, I think I can go 2 ways here, but the most obvious option I think is going to be a check. Allowing my opponent, if he slightly picked up a little bit of equity, maybe if he's floating us with random king highs or jack highs, maybe a hand like jack 10 picks up a gutter ball, maybe a hand like king jack or king 10. All those hands are definitely going to want to bet when I check to them. I'll definitely be, I guess, quote unquote, not repping my hand and playing it a little weak, which is obviously what we want to show that we're doing. But those hands will play best as bluffs as they don't have that much showdown value. You know, you don't want to be checking back king high here all that often if you're floating it. So when I check it over to my opponent, he checks it back. That kind of gives me a suspicion that he does have some showdown value, maybe a hand like pocket 7s, pocket 8s, or something like that. And when the river card comes out, a brick, this is a pretty easy spot for us to bet out a really small sizing. I don't think that my opponent's going to be able to really call any big amount. So I think this bet can accomplish a couple of things. By leading out here for like 10%, although it seems pretty stupid, I can get my opponent to call with hands that are just really bad, like king highs and pocket 5s, pocket 6s, all those middling pairs. And I can also allow my opponent to turn all of those hands into bluffs because their bluff doesn't have to be that large. They can make it 1.5k or 2k, as opposed to if I bet a regular amount, they're just going to fold all these hands anyways. All that to be said, my opponent snap folds king high. I'm really happy with the way I play this hand. I don't say it often, as I'm not really happy with the way I play the hands very often, but with the sizings and allowing my opponent the maximum rope to make a mistake, just unfortunate that he was good enough to not make one. In this following hand, we pick up pocket 4s in the hijack. We raise it to 150. One of the few players I do have some history with, Mr. Randy, 3 coins, is directly to my left and decides to 3-bet to 350. Pretty easy spot for us to continue, especially against such a small sizing. And when the flop comes out, giving us 2 pair, not in the way we were expecting, I guess, 5, 5, 6. A little bit tricky, as we can obviously be really ahead here, or, you know, worst case scenario, be drawing damn near dead. With the action on my opponent after we check, he decides to bet 375. All that to be said, yeah, I can't be folding here, so I gotta at least flick in the call button once, which we do, and the turn card is a perfect 3 of hearts. Perfect because obviously we pick up some equity, but even better yet, I think this is a really great card for us to check raise on. Although Randy is not the opponent that you'd want to be bluffing, as he's just not going to be folding all that often, he's good enough to get sticky with these big over cards, especially against someone as active as me. But for the off chance that we can even get him to fold equity, which is really important, our hand can get counterfeit. Any 6 on the river is not good. Any face card or ace is probably not that much better. So my intention here is to check, raise my opponent, but we don't get the option as he checks it back. The river card is exactly what we were dreading. It's a 6. Ugh. Double pairing the board here, we now end up with one of the worst hands we're going to have here, I suppose. This is where understanding this as a fact is important. Although this is one of the worst hands I'll ever end up on this river with, being 4 high, I just can't bluff at this hand. Just like we talked about on the turn, although it would have been a nice spot to check raise, Randy, Mr. 3 Coins, is not in the business of folding ace highs or king highs in this spot. Like bluffing here, the only thing I can get or hope that my opponent can do is to fold out a hand like jack high or 10 high if he 3-bet me with something like that. But alas, it'd be really stupid for me to bluff him, so I just check. Randy puts out a really nice cheeky little value bet. Obviously we have to fold. I immediately tell Randy what my intentions were, and he laughs it off and says that he was going to snap call me if I did bet the river. So, I don't know. Let me know in the comment section down below if you'd be bluffing there. Just a tricky spot, but, you know, guess we chickened out. Action folding over to me in the low jack this time around, and this time around, once again, almost deja vu, baby, except this time we're in late position. It's pocket aces. We race to 150. 3 blinds make the call. We're going 4 ways off to a flop, hoping that we can get some pretty favorable ones, and yeah. Ace 9-5. It's not going to be much better than that. There is a couple of gutter balls out there for my opponents to have, as well as flush draws. So with the action checking over to me here, considering we're 4 ways, it's a good idea to size up here for multiple reasons, but the most important one being, if anyone is going to call here multi-way, understanding that I'm probably strong when I bet this flop, they're going to have a lot of equity by way of a flush draw or a combo draw, pair plus flush draw. There's just so many options here. So with the action on me, it's time to go big. I make it $450 to go into a size of a pot sized 600. Only the small blind Mr. OFC calls, and the turn card is quads. Let's go. Action checked over to me, and I think this is where I get a little ahead of myself. Although earlier I think I gave myself the rep of a little bit of a punter to these new opponents by blasting off there with an 8 on that first hand of the session. I just don't think this spot's going to be over bluffed. With the action checked over to me, I think betting small again is a good idea to keep my opponent's flush draws in there. But when I bomb it here, it's just going to have to be a cooler. Like, they're going to only be able to continue with pocket 9s and pocket 5s. And there's not a whole lot of, you know, those cards left. So after pumping it up to 1.2k, OFC pretty quickly gets away from his queen 10 of diamonds. That's really unfortunate because that hand is drawing absolutely stone dead. Maybe he continues, but we let him off the rope way too easy. We are only 45 minutes into today's session, and you wouldn't believe it, we pick up pocket aces for the 3rd time in a matter of 22 hands dealt. That is unbelievable, and unbelievably so, we're still stuck on the session from our early on punt. Nonetheless, we are not going to harp on the past. There is a $100 straddle on, as we promised earlier, and the action's on me in the small blind. We raise to 400. Only the big blind Mr. 3 Coins makes the call, and the flop comes out 10 high. Easy spot for us to c-bet. We don't even need to go that big. I think anywhere in the neighborhood of 40%-ish is fine. I make it $400 to go. And then my opponent pretty quickly decides to min click me to 800. Once again, I have played with Randy. It's one of the few people that I have played with. Randy and or 3 Coins was on the stream that we played the day prior in Austin, which I VPipped 100%. If you haven't watched that video, link is in the description. It's a freaking sick one. Yeah, we have some history. Randy saw me do a bunch of really dumb things. He also just saw me punt it with an 8. Although I would almost never recommend doing something like this, I decide to just go all in for 3,500-ish. Yeah, sure, it seems a little punty or a little excessive. How can you ever get called by worse? But let me promise you guys something. I promise you, against 3 Coins, he is down to spin it. He is down to gamble. He's down to go for it. And I promise you, not one to be bluffed. So if he has a hand like ace 10, if he has a hand like queen jack, if he has a hand like 7-8, he's gonna click the call button and run it. And my goal is to get all the money in when I think I have the best hand and I have the most equity. So after doing so, we fade the snap call, which is the best feeling ever, and he goes into the tank before eventually deciding to make the call. What a sicko. Randy calls with bottom pair. I told you he is not one to be fucked with. This guy's an absolute monster, and he's going to make me have to earn it here. We do decide to run it twice, which I'm always happy to oblige whatever my opponent decides to do. We're running the first board here as it comes to 7 of clubs on the turn. and a queen of hearts on the river. Once again, I'm pretty much in the dark here. I don't know what Randy has. Those two cards don't look great to me as a bunch of straights get there, but on the second one, the turn card comes a deuce of clubs, and he immediately shouts in happiness and flips over 3 deuce. The river card needs to pair, and it doesn't. Unfortunate there, once again being a massive favorite to not scoop against Randy. It's just something I have to get used to. He has 9 lives similar to that of a cat. We were in so many big pots against him and just incapable of scooping. Seems like today's just another one of those days. Action picks up here when under the gun limps, and then the button decides to isolate to 75. I am in the straddle and decide to call with Jack 4 of spades. Shout out to Robbie. The limper goes ahead and makes a call as well. We're going 3 ways off to a flop here, which we flop bottom pair on. I check it over to the limper, who decides to lead out for 75. The button raises to 175, and the action is now on me. Although immediately I wanted to fold after seeing a lead here and then a tiny raise like this, I think 3-betting is kind of a sick little play here. Definitely a field play. I feel like both of my opponents are a little bit on the weaker side, and I guess if I have a 4, I can have pocket 4s, so I make it $400 to go. This is just the absolute click fest. The limper shrugs and folds, and then the button calls. We're going to a turn card here that comes out the deuce of diamonds, bringing a backdoor flush draw. Couple of options here, but I think continuing with my bluff is probably an okay idea. A little worried for my opponent to have a hand here, but there's still a chance that we're up against a hand that's drawing like 5-6. And if we can get a hand to fold that is better than us, pocket 10s, pocket jacks, that'd be wonderful as well. I make it $800 to go, to which my opponent thinks about it for a bit and just gives me the massive middle finger to my face, slaps me across my face to be that, to be specific, and raises to 1.8k. We pretty quickly make the fold, and the stand-up game is on, which we've already luckily had removed our knit button. Our opponent hasn't, and I totally forgot about that, and he windmills the old 9-3 offsuit. He definitely earned his button here. Gosh darn it, we got absolutely owned. Even though we were bluffing, that was just a crazy hand. At this point in the session, we are still stuck. Things are not really panning out. Big pot's not swinging in my direction, but we are looking to fix that. Early position makes it 175 to go. The low jack, the cutoff, the button. I'm in the small blind. We look down at queen jack offsuit. I join the calling party as well. The straddler calls, and we're like 6 or 7 ways to a flop where we make ourselves top pair. There is 2 hearts out there. The initial raiser bets out for 300. The button calls Mr. Wooney, and I myself make the call as well. Turn card's not a great one as it comes out the king of diamonds, putting an overcard to our pair. Not great. All those semi-bluffs now improve, but luckily for us, the action checks through. Looking to get there on a river, and that is not what happens. The front door flush is completed, and the ace of hearts. Yeah, not the best card in the world, but when the action checks over to the button, Mr. Wooney decides to bet out 1,000. I am just getting some spidey senses that are tingling. Something feels a little weird about this situation. I can't describe it, but sometimes I pick up these live reads and I just kind of like to go with them. There's no science or proven fact behind it, but playing enough hands in poker, you realize that when the action is double checked to the in position player on the river, even if it's multi-way, they're going to take a stab if a scare card comes, whether they have or not. I flick in the call with third frickin' pair. Yes, that is maybe a little bit of a punt with the player to act behind, but I think that if my opponent happens to have like an ace 10 behind, or maybe like a king jack, something like that behind me to act, he's going to want to have to fold that hand as I now call here. How can he call with a slightly better hand than me? He doesn't call, which is awesome, but he raises. He raises to like 6,000. Gosh darn it. Again, we get our hand caught in the cookie jar. Button snap folds. We snap fold. Man, this is not fun. All right, the $100 straddle is back on and ready to go. I'm in late position with ace 8 offsuit. I'm going to go and try to steal this money. There are so many monies in the middle. It's probably an okay idea to loosen up just a tad bit, especially in an action game. I make it 300 to go. In the small blind, Mr. Elijah decides to 3-bet to 1,000. Action folds back to me, and if I think I had a hand like ace 5 or ace 4 suited, one of those little grinder GTO hands, I would definitely consider 4-betting here, as Elijah has been very, very open with his starting hand selections for 3-bets, but with a hand that's honestly pretty good against what he's been 3-betting with. It sounds stupid, but I think we can just call and play this safely in position, which I go ahead and do. Again, we're both playing super deep, which is a good problem to have, and even more so when the flop comes out giving us top pair. It's a rainbow board, so when the action checks over to me, I suspect that he has some version of showdown value. When he checks this flop here, especially when it's ace high, I just don't ever think he's going to have an ace. Maybe sometime you have like wheel aces like ace 4, ace 3 to pot control, but more than likely he's going to have like a hand like queens or kings, so I just check it back. The turn card's an 8, so now we are absolutely loving our lives. At this point, he checks me for a second time, and with the backdoor flush draw out there and 2 pair to boot, seems like an easy spot for us to get value from a 10 of hands, so I make it 700 to go, going pretty small. My opponent makes a call. The river card comes out the 7 of hearts, bringing in that backdoor flush draw, as well as the backdoor straight draw. And when my opponent checks it over to me, I have to look back in my hand to make sure I do have the ace of hearts, which I do. And knowing that, I feel significantly more comfortable going for slightly larger value, as it's a little more unlikely for my opponent to have a hand like ace 3 of hearts, because obviously that doesn't exist anymore in this specific instance. So I decide to bet 2,000 into about 3.5K. Pretty sizable amount here. If my opponent has a hand like pocket kings, I still made it small enough for him to consider it. If he has a random ace that he's been playing super cautiously, he's just going to have to pay me off. He thinks about it, and then I feel like he's going to raise me. And although nobody ever bluff raises these rivers, I just have a hand that's too good to fold. But then he starts going over his head and starts saying out loud that he's thinking about calling me super light. So obviously he's no longer thinking about raising, he's thinking about hero calling. Unfortunately, he decides to make the fold. He actually had like 15th pair. He had 8-6 of diamonds. So yeah, that's how much of a punter I've been in today's session. People are considering calling me off with these like 15th pair holdings. We continue to battle along here. Under the gun is where I find myself, and I make it $150 to go after looking down at ace queen, the parking lot hand. It looks like Studio Paul, directly to my left, knows that I have the parking lot hand and wants to send me to the parking lot even faster when he 3-bets to 475. Action folds back to me, and although Studio Paul is a good friend of mine, we are here to battle. There is literally no friends at the poker table, so I make the call. The flop comes out ace king 4 or ace king 7 that does have 2 clubs out there, and when the action checks over to him, he bets 450. Easy spot for us to call here. We can still beat a lot of his semi bluffs. We can still beat a bunch of his aces that are worse. But when the turn card comes the jack of hearts, I go from being super happy about the spot to kind of really disappointed. We now lose to ace jack. We now lose to a hand like queen 10 of clubs. There's a bunch of hands that now we lose to. So when I check it over to my opponent, to be quite honest, I'm kind of praying that he just checks it back. It'll be more likely that I do have the best hand, and once again, it'll control the size of the pot. He does not like any of these ideas, and he decides to bet 1375. It's a really big sizing here, and to be quite fair, I just in real time can't pick up a ton of the bluffs that he'll have. Sure, he can maybe have a hand like 10-9 of clubs or 8-9 of clubs, but I just don't think that against early position versus early position, he'd be having those suited connectors. I think he'd be weighted more to pocket aces, pocket kings, pocket jacks, ace king, ace jack, king jack. All these hands are doing way better than me right now. So although it pains me to do it, and I hate folding more than anything in this world, I gotta do it. I gotta make a disciplined lay down here. I make the fold. I would later find out what he had, but what I will tell you guys is I did rabbit hunt the river because I was really frustrated and things had been going in my favor. I almost never rabbit hunt, but I did in this instance. And the river card came out the 3 of clubs. So Studio Paul was obviously bluffing there with 9 high, the club variety. But touche to him, he got me to fold the best hand. And unluckily for him, I guess, I didn't call, and the river did give him a flush, and honestly, I probably would have had to call on that river considering how much money was in the middle. But either way, that's neither here nor there. We have some more hands to go over. Poker is such a hit or miss thing. In yesterday's session, every time I needed to zig, I zigged. Every time I needed to zag, I zagged. And that's even more helpful when you're playing every single hand. Today, we're playing slightly more selective as we're only playing 50% of hands, but still, every time I need to zig, I've been zagging. Every time I need to zag, I've been zigging. So things haven't been panning out in my favor. Seems like I've made all the wrong decisions. And hopefully in this next hand, we can do something a little better. When late position raises to 175, I'm in the cutoff with ace king of spades, baby. Big slick. We love it. After being stuck all the monies in the world, I've got to make some of it back. I make it 475. Then the small blind, Mr. Studio Paul, once again wants to slap me in the face. And if you've ever thought that you can soft play a friend, it just doesn't exist here. He decides to 4-bet to 1.2k. Action folds back over to me, and I think about this one for quite a while, and I realize that being out of position in the small blind, even though we are the action players in the game, I just don't think Paul is going to be waking up with a bunch of garbage here. He's probably going to have queens or ace king himself, and at least I am in position, so I'll keep the pot a little more reasonable, and I just make the call. Playing super deep here, about 10k each to start the hand, so we're going to be going off to battle. The flop comes out 5-4 deuce, all rainbows. Monotone boards are not fun, especially in 4-bet pots. Not because I think either one of us flopped the flush here, but because I don't have a diamond. At this point, my opponent checks it over to me, and to be quite honest, there's a chance that we have the same hand, so I just check it back for the moment. I'm in position, which is wonderful. The turn card comes a queen of spades, which is not what I love to see, but when he checks it over to me, I go, amongst my options, and I fall on the small bet here. If I can get my opponent to fold a chop, that'd be unbelievably great for me. And that's kind of what this bet is serving a purpose of doing. I'm going to bet really tiny here and hope that he has a hand like ace king of hearts and just has to fold. I am in position, and if I get called here, I just have to shut it down. I'm never going to get my opponent to fold a better hand unless the river is a scare card like, I don't know, a 3 or a diamond, I guess. So when he makes a call, I'm pretty much over this hand immediately. The river card is a 10 of hearts. Yeah, not great. Nothing really helping me here, and when the action's checked over to me, we pretty quickly check it back. He shows pocket king, so once again falling into it, another massive cooler. To be quite fair to myself, we could have lost a lot more there if we got the money in pre-flop, but that kind of would have been a punt. So all things considered, pretty happy with the outcome there. By this point in the session, I am so stuck and so card dead that I'm starting to push the action. In this next hand, the cutoff makes it 150 to go, and to be quite fair, poor Benham, I have been 3-betting him so much today, and to be fair, I've had good hands a lot of the nights, but even a hand like this, ace 9 of diamonds, with the amount of free money that's out there, I'm going to be 3-betting. I make it 450, and he makes the call once folded over to him. Flop comes out pretty solid here. Even though we don't make a pair, we have an overcard as well as the nut flush draw. When he checks it over to me, I don't want to do some stupid cutesy small bet. I'm stuck. Getting him to fold anything here is great. I only have ace high. I make it 800 to go. He pretty quickly makes a call. I don't love it, especially against my massive sizing here, but when the turn card comes the queen of clubs, yeah, what am I holding out for? When he checks it to me, once again, I'm going to go for it all. If we can build the size of the pot by the size of the river, we can definitely get all the money in the middle. I will say pretty obviously he has more than 1.5k, although the stacks aren't correct in this specific instance. After he does make the call of my $1,500 bet, he's leaving himself about $4,500 behind. The river card comes and helps me, but not in the way I was expecting, as it comes the ace of spades. With the action checked over to me, this is when I get a little upset at myself. I don't even think about the hand. I just snap check it back. Why do you just do anything snap? I hate when I make snap decisions. Even if I waited for 5 seconds and checked back, honestly, checking back might be the perfect answer to this equation, but not even considering or taking a look at my opponent to see if he liked the river, if I can get even a little more value here. I'm not saying I can go all in and get called here, but if there's a small chance I can bet like $1,000, $2,000 and get more value from a worse hand, that's a good idea. Or, at least think about it before I check. All that to be said, we snap check it back, and we got lucky in an odd way as our opponent had jack 10 of spades, so we get there on the river, not in the way we were expecting, but we will definitely take it at this point. This following hand honestly exemplifies what I was talking about in the previous one, where I'm a little stuck, a little card dead, and it's a little much getting to my head. I'm in late position. I make it 150 to go with 10-9 offsuit. Yeah, not great. 2 players from the blinds call, and the flop comes out, giving me quite a bit of equity, actually. We have an open-ended straight draw as well as a flush draw. When the action checks over to me, I just throw in a c-bet of 200. The straddler calls, and we're going heads up to a flop now that comes to 6 of hearts. Shouldn't change a whole lot here, so when the action checks over to me, if I can get my opponent to fold these middling pairs, probably a good idea, so I make it 550. My opponent pretty quickly makes the call. The river card now comes out the 5 of hearts. Once again, it doesn't change much here, so when the action checks over to me, I think about my options here, and I'm just like, man, if I can get my opponent to fold like ace or king high clubs, that'd be great. Outside of that, I'm probably not going to get much to fold, but let's just go for it. I have 10 high. This is an example of one of the worst hands I'll ever have, and it's probably a decent spot to go for it because I am in position. I make it 1.2K, $1,200. Pretty big sizing here, looking to get those middling pairs and ace highs and king highs to fold. My opponent pretty quickly calls it off here and announces middle set. Yeah, middle set is good. It's super good. Just like all the favorite movies that you have watched, we have saved the very best for last. The denouement, is that what he... that was just a fancy word I remember hearing in like 4th grade. But nonetheless, this is the last hand and the main event of the evening. In this spot, the cutoff makes it $150 to go. I'm next to act in the button, and we look down at Jack 10 offsuit. Not a great hand, but once again, not very many hands left in the night. We're going to go for it. I just make the call. The straddler calls as well, and then the double straddle decides to 3-bet to 450. We all make the call here. Not a whole lot to be said about, how small this is, but, we're all priced in to call here. And when the flop comes out 9-7-3, I am immediately thinking, oh, poker gods. If you can bless me with an 8 on this turn, I swear to you, I'll be thankful at the very least. The double straddler decides to throw out a c-bet, a pretty small one, albeit to 375, and like I said, it's a small one. I'm super happy here as we have a gutter ball and 2 overs. Don't know how live my cards are, but when I make the call and the initial straddler makes the call, we're going 3 ways to a turn card that is, Jesus. The fucking mirage is all I can think about. Oh my God. The 8 of clubs. What a dirty dog. Oh my God. Jesus. I am shivering. I'm sweating just thinking about this hand. Oh my goodness. We have the absolute nuts. And even better yet, my opponent is still betting. What do you got, buddy? I don't know. And it doesn't matter to me. $1,300 going into the abyss, the ether. Action on me now. Obvious spot to raise. We got to build the size of this pot, baby. 3 gentlemen here to battle. Make it $3,500 to go. Leaving myself just shy of $5,500 behind. Then, I couldn't make this up. I could not have written a Hollywood script even better than this. The first straddler is thinking about it. He doesn't even have money out there, and he's thinking about it. As every second passes, my heart sinks and sinks into the realization that I might just, by some miracle, after playing some horrible poker, have a chance to get unstuck. That reality is closer to being met when he makes the call. The double straddler thinks about it as well, but he thinks better of it and makes the fold. I am praying to the higher powers above, the poker gods that stand above us. Please, brick on the river and the dealer. Boom! Ace of diamonds. I couldn't have asked for a better card. When the action checks over to me after a long tank, my opponent decides to check, and now here I am with only one decision between me and $20,000+. I go all in for 5.5 or 5.7K, I should be exact. And my opponent starts to tank, and he tanks forever. After he starts talking, he starts saying, hey, would you do that with 3s and 7s? So I'm like, man, he actually has a pretty good hand. In real time, I thought he had top 2 pair, a hand like 8, 9, maybe even the lower end of the straight. But when he starts talking about sets, I'm like, God damn, call. This is an easy spot for you to call, brother. Didn't you see my punt earlier? I guess he didn't, because he's thinking about it with pocket 8s. And let me just take you guys a step back here. Let me just be real with you guys. It's so easy in poker to just whine and complain. Oh, I never get there right. Blah, blah, blah. I am on the river with 100%. And not only did I need to hit my 6% or my 2-outer to win the hand, but I also needed my opponent to make the overcall in the flop. Let that sink in. The little dominoes that fell into place for this moment to happen, for me to be all in for $5,500 on this river, for my opponent to be just one chip away from calling and making this $22,000. It was all the dominoes had to fall in place. I just wanted to say that it's so easy to be clouded in the moment, having no appreciation for this beautiful game, but here I am on the right side of luck. Now, all I need my opponent to do is snap out of this tank and make a pretty easy call, and thankfully, he does. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the biggest pots I've ever played in my life, also happened to be one of the luckiest pots. I will say, happy with the way we played it. We were able to extract the absolute maximum, although it would have taken an absolute imbecile to not get the maximum in this spot. This is what you call a cooler. But oh my word, I am so thankful that it happened.
I can do this with my eyes closed. It's too easy. Too easy. It's too easy. I've been there, done it.
All right, so we just finished up the stream, and that was by far and away one of the most painful streams of my life. I will say this, I talked to Paul, and I told Paul, because if you guys can't tell, I'm a little under the weather. I told Paul today's gonna be my flu game. We started off hot, aces a bunch of times, fucking quad aces. I mean, things were unreal, honestly. And then played pretty bad. Things kind of slowed down pretty heavy. And then, yeah, we all been there. We hit a miracle 2-outer to make the pot as big as possible, and somehow we got the maximum, thankfully. So, I haven't done the reconnaissance work, but if I'm not mistaken, I do believe that we were into the game for 17,000-ish, and we ended up cashing out for 22 and some change. So I'll take 2 5K wins back to back, to be quite honest. I had all of my own action, so one of the biggest games I've ever played. Honestly, the game was huge. That's probably gonna do it for me today. I am super tired, pretty under the weather, long line to cash out, so let's go take care of that. Let's go.
With my eyes closed.